hear you, and I can see
my screen.
Yes, the screen is being shared. I can see it.
All
yes.
Right. Good afternoon, comrades and ladies and gentlemen from the media. As Nomusa has indicated, we would want to apologize for the late starting. We have just concluded our National Executive Committee meeting now, and therefore we wish to present that apology, and for our president who is going to be joining us so that we are then able to take some calls. So as I'm sharing the screen, basically the statement is about the response to the alarming increases in COVID-19 infection in our schools and in communities. The National Executive Committee of SADTU, the biggest union in education and public service sectors, today held a special meeting to come up with an urgent response to the spikes in COVID-19 cases in our schools and communities. The rate of community transmissions are impacting on the school. The frontline workers who are at the coalface of the pandemic have been infected and affected. We remember all the workers, children and families whose members have succumbed to the virus. We grieve with all our members and every family in our country. We are in a crisis and every life matters. The Special National Executive Committee resolved that schools should close until after the peak. When the Minister of Basic Education announced that schools would be opened under Alert 4, our organization, SADTU, together with the other teacher unions, called on the minister to ensure the safety of teachers, lecturers, education support personnel, learners, and students, because we could not afford to lose lives. Above all, we raised concern about the readiness of the provincial departments with regards to the availability of health and safety essentials that had to be put in place before the opening of the institutions. We then urged the departments to comply with the 14 non-negotiables that were required by the law before our learning institutions could resume any activities. These non-negotiables would have ensured that the learning and teaching environment is compliant and optimal for schools-based activities to unfold in safe conditions. All evidence on the ground is that there is no effective teaching and learning that is taking place under the current conditions. The pandemic has led to pandemonium in the education sector, and this can be linked to the lackluster leadership that we have been experiencing from Department of Basic Education at various levels. The decision of the National Executive to call for the schools to close for the period was informed by the following. The peak. In the country, the virus is reaching its peak, and at the same time, we are in the winter season, which is known for its influence and impact. The scientists have been advocating for flu shots for everyone since March, this to protect the immune system and also to avoid clogging the healthcare system during this period. The community infection have been increasing since the reopening of the school and inevitably affecting the schools. This is going against the WHO's advice that when you reopen the schools, the pandemic must be under control, that there are preventive measures, that there are systems to track and trace the contact person in the schools. So in our country, when we reopened the schools, we did not basically follow the line that the WHO has been recommending. And that's why we see the spike of infections. The science also informed our decision that when we debated about reopening the schools, it was guided by the science. That was explicit that the children were not susceptible to infections, and that even if infected, were not capable of infecting other learners or other children, but could infect those with vulnerabilities, especially the elderly. The study done presented a picture where indeed the learners in Australia or in Italy were not infecting each other. That is what we were presented with in order to motivate for the reopening of the schools. The South African situation, however, has provided another side of the virus where so many learners have been infected and 7 have lost their lives. The evolution of the virus compelled the leadership to request a meeting with the Minister of Education to engage on how to respond, because this is a health issue and requires health experts. We call on the Minister of Basic Education through the NICD to use the peak period to provide answers to the teachers and come up with new strategies to curb the spread and to save lives in our country. The other development that compelled the leadership to request a meeting with the minister was the airborne nature of the virus. This required the response in how to deal with the classroom situation. It required new ways of treating closed environments and the ventilation issues. So we are asking a question: can we be able to open the windows in the middle of the freezing winter day? Because that is what the virus requires, is that there must be fresh air and not aircon. But we can't open the windows during winter so that there's ventilation if this virus is airborne. Therefore, it requires that we use the peak and the influenza period as an opportunity to get the scientists to work on the responses while the learners are at home. The third reason why we had to arrive at the decision as an organization that this is the time for us to really take a break so that we fix all the problems that are there. It is the inconsistencies in the application of the standard operating procedures and the Department of Health. The different interpretation and applications of the standard operating procedures were presenting discomfort from the principals and the teachers. This matter is compounded by the lack of capacity or the overburdened healthcare system to respond to the standard operating procedures expectation. This is a serious matter that puts lives and health of everyone at risk and needed urgent attention. The suspension of classes during this peak period would afford the platforms entrusted with the regulation and protocols to amend and train the users. The situation is dire and impacts on everyone in the community and not only schools, because schools are the microcosm of the society. The other health issues related to the standard operating procedures and its application were isolation and quarantine periods and the secrecy around contact person and those infected, which in itself was exacerbating the transmission, because the principals were told not to tell anybody. So you have a suspect, but the suspect continued to come to school on a daily basis. So basically, the suspect, because it's asymptomatic, will keep on transmitting, whereas nobody knows, and that is really creating more problems for the public and our communities. The NEC therefore called on all to avoid using education in our country as a platform to gain cheap political points, but also urge the powers that be to get their ears on the ground and respond to the loud calls of our communities in suspending the classes during this peak period and the delay of the return of the other grades in order to help the stabilization of health and education system. This isn't about power play of win-lose, but about a real consideration that learning can take place under current conditions of closing and reopening of the schools almost every day since the return of grade 7 and grade 12. Some of the conspicuous challenges that the teachers and school managers face include a significant number of schools that are already expressing a high number of absenteeism due to the anxiety and fear that both learners and parents are experiencing. Parents are keeping their children at home, they are not sending them. So we have got low attendance in our schools. The standard operating procedures for the closure of school upon confirmation of a positive case is not being implemented consistently and uniformly across the provinces. As a result, schools are on autopilot and acting outside of this particular protocol, and that is a risk to the community and not only to the school. The appointment of substitute teachers to address the high absenteeism due to sick leave has not been addressed, and this put pressure on the limited staff members that are there in our schools. These increase anxiety, trauma, but also it increases the uncertainties in terms of the learners, whether they are going to be teachers in the classroom or not. Psychosocial services that are now required on an urgent basis to mitigate against the anxiety that is experienced in schooling communities has not been effected as earlier committed by the minister. Poor infrastructure continues to define the education of the workers as child or the working class child in the township and the rural communities. The NEC, upon receiving all provincial reports about the dire state of the system on the ground, thus took the decision to call on the DBE to suspend all schooling activities with immediate effect until the peak of the pandemic recedes. The NEC further makes a call that whilst consideration should be made for the grade 12 class in strictly controlled environment like camps, there should be a consideration to align their examination in line with the Department of Higher Education and Training plans so that pressure and anxiety is also addressed, because you can't write an examination when you are so anxious, when you have got a fear and so forth. So we need to address that. The NEC called for the following to happen while the schools are closed in order to ensure that learning continues. This is informed by the fact that we are going to be living with COVID for long, and therefore we cannot abandon other platforms of learning that can begin to assist us. One is that we need coordinated radio lessons by teachers. This would reach more learners in the far-flung areas in the rural communities. Some of these particular lessons should be interactive and instruction based on radio lessons. We also call for the television programs, which are well coordinated and supported by the teachers and the learners. We also call for the use of mobile phone to access content and curriculum material. We also call for the use of education apps where content is verified and authenticated by the department not to be harmful to our children and to our teachers. But we also call for the use of social media such as WhatsApp and many other social media as part of accessing education so that learning does not stop when the learners are at home. We further call for the provision of infrastructure and gadgets for online learning. In other words, we are calling for zero rating of data for learners and the teachers for the purposes of teaching and learning when the learners are still at home. The union remains concerned by the allegations of corruption during this lockdown and with the reopening of the schools in particular. Edupreneurs have no shame and continue to steal, even through selling fake and low-level protective equipment. We call on our structures on the ground to provide us with more information, to empower us to lay charges and call for immediate action by law enforcement agencies. These we have got to do as the National Executive Committee because we believe in the power of education. We believe it is important that all learners in our country must receive equal education, must be treated equally. So equity is at the center of our message as the National Executive Committee. Hence, in summary, with all the reasons that we have presented, we are going to meet with the minister and present to the minister our resolution about the immediate suspension of the classes during this peak period and during this influenza period to allow ourselves to work on a number of issues that must stabilize the healthcare system and really relieve the pressure on the healthcare system, because schools can play a very important role in making sure that we cut and deaccelerate and cap the spread and the transmission of the virus. And we also support the fact that, yes, learners must continue to be receiving their nutrition during this particular period. We must find ways on how we have got to provide the nutrition in terms of the food parcels or in terms of any other way, so that they are able to be nutritious, to be able to defend them from the attack by this particular virus. So we thank you. We will be able to issue the corrected and the revised statement. As you can see, there were some few typing mistakes. We want to apologize. We are teachers. We've got to ensure that the grammar and everything is perfect so that the message is not lost in debates. But the message is simple. It is that we as an organization, we cannot continue to be sending condolence messages to members and the communities. We know this particular pandemic and the virus is not only affecting teachers, but it's affecting everybody in the community. What we are doing is to make the schools community and ourselves to contribute towards the de-accelerating, the suppression of the transmission by limiting the movements, by limiting the travel. So it's how we have resolved as an organization. So our condolences to those who have lost their lives in the health system, in the education, in the minings, and everywhere is informed by the fact that this is the time for solidarity. This is the time for compassion. This is the time for kindness. And as the National Executive Committee of SADTU, we're going to meet with all the other trade unions in education to really present a united voice to the minister to really accede to these demands that we are making. Thank you, and over to you, Comrade President. Comrade Maboto.
Yes.
I think the president has not been able to connect. Can we allow a situation where questions can be posed, and then if the questions have been posed on the chat, we will check on that, and then we will also deal with other issues.
Yes, I think we can take questions, if any, from the different media houses. But I had thought NOMSA will facilitate it. I see two hands. There is Sustain Ngagamba as well as Mahlago iPhone. Are you ready for questions, JS? Let me take Sustain.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the briefing. It's just Sustain Ngagamba from News 24. Just a question to the union. There have been other organizations that have been calling for schools to close during the peak, and we've actually seen court cases. Is SADTU also going to be going to court should the Department of Basic Education refuse to close schools? Thank you.
Thank you, Sustain. Mahlago.
Mahlago Komani from SABC News. I just wanted to ask if the unions will be telling educators to stay at home, seeing that you are calling on the DBE to close schools. And I think also a second question would be, there was a statement that was made about the secrecy in terms of reporting. Could you please elaborate on that for us? And when you speak about that, the numbers have gone up and students are getting infected as well, is this infections that they're picking up within the schooling environment or perhaps at home? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahlago. The next person is Nkosikhona Duma.
Hi, it's Nkosikhona Duma from Eyewitness News here. The first question that I have is, the statement you've just made makes some very serious claims or allegations, like the fact that, like the statement you're saying that there hasn't been any effective teaching during this period. What data have you used to substantiate their claim? And also, some of the suggestions that you are making, the use of mobile phones, education apps. I mean, given the fact that many of our public school learners come from disadvantaged areas. What makes you think that this program will be democratic and reach all the pupils that it's supposed to reach? Thank you.
Thank you, Nkoskhona. Let me take Paletsile. Let me take Paletsile.
Repeating. Anyway, hi, there seems to be an echo. It's Palelo from Jacaranda FM News. My question does have to do with the question that was just asked. What is so hard about declaring the academic year done? Why are we still wanting learners to learn via apps or TV? Why can't we just say, let's call it quits, let's do this next year? I just want to know, why can't we go that route?
Thank you very much, Paletsile. Let me take Maketa.
Thank you. This is Malafani Maketa, the branch secretary of SADTU in Fixbeck. My question to you from the statement that was just made, I want to know as to what is the immediate effect as to when should we expect teachers and learners stopping from going to school, attending schools? Because now, if you can check, the temperatures are low, are extremely low, the cold front is passing and it's too cold. So it is really giving a problem with this behavior of this virus, that it really spread faster when it is cold. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. The next person will be Bongani. Bongani.
Thanks a lot, Chair. The union is making allegations that some principals have been told not to disclose teachers who have this disease. And to me, it sounds like a very serious allegations that might put more people in danger of getting infected. What have you reported this matter to the authority? Because it seems like to me it's a criminal activity. Have you reported this matter to the authority to take actions against those who are behind telling principal not to disclose if there are teachers and people who are infected? And also another question, you are talking about lessons being conducted through radio, TV, apps and WhatsApp. Like, are our teachers or your members in your union, are they ready? How is this going to happen? Are they teachers who are going to be equipped to conduct this lesson through what you are saying? And I also wanted to find out how many, in as far as the SADTU is aware, how many teachers have so far been succumbed to this disease, and how many learners, if you can please help me. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think the next person will be Scriber, but before we take Scriber, may I request those who have spoken to put their hands down so that I will know that they have already spoken. Bongani, Nkoskhona, Sesteina. Thank you very much. Scriber.
Thank you, Mamuto, for facilitating for us. This is Sinisipa Schreiber from the Record newspaper. As the union has put it, that it is calling for the suspension of classes, of learning during this time, and further proposing that for online learning. We know that as a country that not everyone has the access to online and everything like that, and that the steps that are taken by the department on the reopen, they have actually tried to sustain it with science, information and all that. My question to you is that during this pandemic, we have seen people acting in solidarity and bringing about some kind for some shedding light and bringing about solutions. As a union, what part are you playing? Because we know the education sector has a lot of people. It's responsible for a lot of people's health. So as a union, what steps are you actually taking? I do understand calling for the suspensions of classes, but what other steps as a union are you taking to ensure people's health is protected? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was our last question, GS. And I've been trying to check whether there are any questions written in the chat box. Seemingly there are no questions. I think that is the first round of questions. We'll take the second round if there are any follow-up questions, GS, but you can respond to the few questions that have been posed to the union. GS?
Thanks, Comrade President Mabuto. And to all the questions that have been posed, I really thank the media for these questions that have been asked. And we have members of the National Executive Committee here, as well. The Deputy General Secretary is connected on the other side to also respond and make additions to that. I'll try to make sure that we answer and not have the second round, because we'll answer in detail so that we answer everything that has been asked. The first question is about what then if we do not get our resolution being acceded by the minister on whether we're going to go to court, given the fact that so many people have gone to court and they have lost. Okay, so the organization has resolved to engage the minister as the employer, first and foremost, to ensure that it is the minister, in terms of the National Education Policy Act, to declare this particular suspension of classes so that we address the problems that we have said we need to address and so forth. So if the minister is not going to be agreeing, the organization has agreed to come up with a program of action. And that particular program of action will then be unveiled as soon as we are not getting any movement or any reception from the minister. So we'll then embark on that particular program of action. We know that in terms of the lockdown and all the other things, we may not be able to have a situation where we say, yes, we'll go into the street, but there are more effective methods that we can use instead of going to court, because many people have gone to court and the court did not help us in it. But we are the teachers, and therefore we know what strong method we can use to ensure that indeed we protect the lives of the learners, the lives of the teachers, the workers, and the lives of the community. And I think I need to be very emphatic. It is that you cannot define a school outside the community. Whatever happens in the community happens in the school. And therefore, what we are doing is to say, can we as education really contribute towards the capping of the spread of this particular virus, and so that's what we do. So the issue of the court might be something we can consider as a last resort, but we think that through engagement we can be able to secure the minister's understanding, because we're talking about lives here. We're talking about the future of education. If many of the teachers die, then what happens in 2021? What happens in 2020? Will the universities be able to produce the number of teachers that we need? So we're talking about the fact that the minister will have got to really take into account the hard facts that we're presenting. So we have not decided to go to court, but we have agreed that we will develop a program through the campaigns committee. Now, we haven't said that we must stay at home immediately. We have said that we are going to table this to the minister and then say to the minister with immediate effect, can we see a suspension of the classes? Because we cannot continue to be in a situation where we know very well that there is no education that is taking place, given all the closures that we have already spoken about. So we have said it's immediate effect. However, we didn't say that from today or from tomorrow to the teacher stay at home. We want to engage first, because we want to do these things in terms of the protocols and the procedures that we have in education which we have agreed, all of us in the Education Labor Relations Council, in terms of the procedures that we follow to engage. But this is very urgent, and the sense of urgency from the side of the employer would have got to be secured, so that we are able to see to it that indeed we can secure the suspension of the classes with immediate effect. I want to expand on the issue of the secrecy, and a number of our colleagues have asked that. What is happening is that we are not saying go and tell everybody about the fact that Maluleke is tested positive, but the people that are close and are in contact with the teacher who has tested positive, they have a right to know, because they need to start taking actions and taking precautions and making sure that they start isolating. But not only isolating from the school, they also have got to take action at home, because they need to know. So if you hide it and then you don't tell them that one of the teachers has tested positive and they were in close contact with that particular teacher, or they were using the same transport with that particular teacher, and then because you have been told not to say anything, then you are risking those particular teachers, because what then happens, they continue not knowing if there is a I'm sorry, President.
Yes.
I think I was cut. I'm back.
Okay, continue, yes.
Am I back? Yes. So the secrecy around this particular thing is that it is putting other people's life in danger. One, because you don't know whether you were in contact with that particular person, okay? You will only know when the person has listed you through their compliance officer or Department of Health, but the principal has not warned you. So two is that this teacher continuously come to school despite the fact that he's a suspect, because you were in contact with the person who has tested positive or who has been sent for testing. So you need proactive action by the principal to ensure that those that the teacher might have told the principal, I was in contact with so-and-so, I was in contact with the learner, and so forth. These people are able to be told so that they know. So this is a concern that we have not reported it to the authorities as it was asked at the provincial level to say, can we follow the standard operating procedure? Because in terms of the standard operating procedure, when the compliance officer from the Department of Health come to the school to conduct a risk management or around the issue of decontamination and the issue of tracking and tracing, you need to be able to have really disclosed in terms of those particular contacts, so that you don't make the work of the Department of Labor difficult, because you need to ensure that those people start taking precautions there and there to save the public from the transmission. They're picking at school or community. Yeah, the question about whether the virus is it's being picked at the school or is being transmitted and so forth. That is a study of the experts that have got to tell us to say, ever since the 6th or the 8th or the 2nd of June, have we begun to be picking up the infection from the schools. That can be able to be determined in terms of the test that has been performed and conducted. And obviously, because the Department of Health is in charge of this particular situation, will then be able to tell the Department of Education on whether we have started seeing infection at the level of the school. But what we have now, and I want to take one example of a province like the Western Cape, just one example, just very quick. So you have more than 600 that has been affected, and almost about 300 have been infected, okay? And 20 in the Western Cape have already lost their lives. 67 in the Eastern Cape have already lost their lives, and so forth. So we will not be able to determine on whether it's the community infection or the school infection. The issue here, it is that we have got to take proactive steps to ensuring that the schools provide a solution towards the de-acceleration of the spread. Two is to making sure that we cut the volumes and the intensity of the volumes that we have on a daily basis in terms of movement to ensure that the tracking and the tracing is made easier so that we are able at the end of the day to curb the spread of this particular virus. But as you have asked the question, we will then be able to start asking those questions from the authorities to then say, ever since we began these 4 weeks, have we started seeing the infection in our schools, or are they coming from the communities and so forth? The issue of no teaching, we have got a list of schools, okay? A list of schools. Let's take West Rand only, just West Rand and so forth. Let's say West Rand by Monday, by last week, about 40 schools were having less than 4% of the children in the classrooms. Almost about out of the 40 schools, 38 schools were closed, okay? Now let's take the Northern Cape. The Northern Cape has got fewer schools. And by yesterday, you had again only 4 learners attending in one of the schools of 20 teachers. So we have that particular information. That is there in front of us to say there is little education taking place. There's little learning and teaching or effective taking place when you have fewer learners in the classroom and you have got teachers. There is little education taking place when you have got more absenteeism by the teachers due to comorbidity, 2, by isolation and quarantine because of the numbers that are there, of course. And clearly it is that there are no substitute teachers, okay? None. There are no substitute teachers for the sick teachers who are at home on sick leave. There is no protocol in terms of working at home for those who have got vulnerabilities because we are still working on those things. And therefore, the time for this peak, it is that we cannot afford to be fixing the punched tire when people are getting infected. We must first deal with the health issue. Let's make sure that the infections are reduced, the infections are avoided, we can prevent the loss of life. Then we can go to the other issues that need to be addressed in terms of how do we substitute teachers who are sick? How do we deal with the issues of the long-term absenteeism of those who have got vulnerabilities and so forth? But it's a health issue first. Now we have got to take an issue about the health. Now the issue of the alternative platforms, schools attendance and so forth. I want to combine those because there are about 3 questions about that. One is that we are fully aware that in our country there's an inequality. And these particular inequalities that we have, the inequalities that we have in our country make it is very impossible for certain platforms to work. But we are saying, because learning must not stop when the schools are closed, because this is not going to be the first time the schools will be closed. With COVID-19, and we hear from those who know that it's going to be with us for long, it means, one, we need to perfect other platforms in terms of blended learning. One of those particular platforms that would work for rural schools and township in particular, where there are people who do not afford the online, is the radio lessons. Those particular radio lessons, we need to blend them in such a way, one, they need to be interactive. Therefore, they must also be able to be instructive so that then you are able to benefit as a learner from the teacher who is dealing with that. We have got so many radio stations in our country, and it is up to us in the department to ensure that those particular things are coordinated and so that they are done. 2, it's about the training. We have got to train, indeed, the teachers to be able to use this particular platform. We are not looking at a short-term solution. We are looking at a long-term solution. As I am saying, we are going to live with the virus. So even after the peak, when we resume the classes, what is going to happen is that a school will be closed for 4 days. A school will be closed for 3 days. What then happens when it is closed is that we need to continue with these particular lessons so that we don't have a situation where the poor remain denied and deprived of education forever. So that is what must happen. The coordinated programs of TV, we can make them to be very effective for our learners. And therefore, it's a coordination between us and the parents and the Department of Education as the teachers to ensure that those lessons are not at 5 o'clock in the morning. Those lessons cannot be at 12 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning because they are not effective. They help nobody. They are not benefiting anyone. So we have to ensure that they are well coordinated, especially the public broadcaster. We're paying our taxes to ensure that it is a broadcaster for the public to help us during emergencies like this. This is the first time we have a disaster like this in our country, and it is for us to work together to ensure that that which doesn't work must work. Yes, boss?
Can I punctuate you?
Yes, boss.
May I request Denki to mute himself or herself because his or her phone is open and it's keep on interrupting us. I can see Denki, somebody. If you can mute yourself and all other participants.
You must unmute yourself, President.
Thank you, GS. You may continue. I just wanted to request people to mute themselves because I was seeing a particular Denki who was actually having an active mic. Thank you very much, GS. You may continue, my leader. Sorry about that.
Okay. So I have responded to the issues of the disclosures, and I've also responded the issues of the infections and so forth, and the data that we have at the end of the day. Now, I want to respond to the last two questions. The last two questions is it difficult to declare 2020 academic year as done? I think we need to be very realistic.
Yes, now Vuyani Mbele. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Yes, you may continue.
Thanks, Vuyani. Is it so hard to declare this year over? If we were living in a country of equality, in a country that respects equity, we would do that immediately. We would be saying 2020 is done. There's nothing we can do. But let's be realistic of the people of South Africa. The independent schools have not only welcomed and received fewer learners, they have already received more than the grades that have been regulated by the ministry. That's one. Well-off schools have not only received grade 12, grade 7, 11, and 6. No, they have already received more grades. So what it means is that if we declare this as being done and dusted with, it means we must be able to say independent public schools in every school, we cannot continue with education. However, we are living in a country of inequalities. We are going to see those schools continuing at the expense of the poor, and hence we are going to meet with the minister to then analyze the situation so that we are then able to say what is possible and what is not possible. Which grade can come back and which grade may not come back, and whether we can really be able to afford after the peak to receive more grades or not. That is a discussion that the National Executive Committee said we must go and have with the minister, because we need to be realistic. We need to be very pragmatic as the people of our country, that the reality that we are seated with this year, we would write off 2020 today, but it is that other learners are going to continue. If they continue, would they not write examination? The courts are going to say in this country, those learners who have continued in independent schools and the well-off school must write examination. So who are going to be the losers? The losers are going to be the poor, the working class child who's going to lose. So unless we are able to secure an agreement with government to say, if we say write off the entire year, we mean everybody, and all must means all. it must not mean all but others. All about education must always mean all. Okay, so that is a discussion that we need to be able to take. So I hear about it. It's possible. It's not that it's not possible. The reality of the situation suggests that we are in that particular situation of saying, can't we start debating that particular issue? But we have got to be very, very realistic and say a poor child, a working class child, is the one that is going to be left behind. And that inequality has got to be addressed. And pandemic, COVID-19 has taught us that we need to be able to confront those particular realities that we deal with. So the solidarity that we have, we are working with a number of institutions, including health institutions, to contribute to the body of knowledge in our country, where we have got to empower our teachers and empower our heads of schools and empower the district offices as we move forward. We are told the pandemic will be with us for 2 years. In South Africa, we may be with the pandemic for 3-5 years because of the inequalities that we have. So we need to have long-term strategies to ensure that we deal with that. So the solidarity that we see, we're working together with all the unions in education. We're working with the school governing bodies, all of them in solidarity to say what programs can we have to assist our education system. So yes, as an organization, we are part of a number of programs. We're working with the South African Human Rights Commission in terms of ensuring that there is compliance as part of pledging solidarity with the poor, pledging solidarity with our communities that have got low standard facilities in this particular country. So we feel, President, I think I have responded to the questions that have been asked. I have said that we have an immediate effect decision. However, because we have got rules in this country, we are not a lawless society, we are going to engage the minister in terms of finding the best solution to implement this particular decision. The decision is about the people of our country. It is about us contributing as education to the deceleration of the transmission. It's about how we can suppress the transmission in our communities by really stopping the movement and so forth. And part of the program is to be activists ourselves, forming committees to educate our people to comply, because we need to be wearing masks, we need to be having to respect social distance, we need to respect the curfew, and we're not happy. Maybe the curfew was supposed to be 6 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock in the evening, because when you come from home, when you come from work, you must go home. When you are from home, you must go to work, so that we are then able to stop the spread of this pandemic. We can't be a lawless society. We have got to ensure that we take personal responsibilities of our lives in order to protect the lives of the many. And that is our attitude as an organization. But President, if the DGS or any of you wants to add, I think you can allow them, Comrade President.
Thank you very much, GS. May I check with the DGS and other NSC members who, if they would want to add something? Can I have an indication? DGS?
No, President, I think the General Secretary responded well to all the questions. I think we should allow for the next round of questions.
Thank you very much. GS, I have 2 hands. I don't know whether you're in a position to take further questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Ngakamba, can I take you? Sorry, Ngakamba, can I request Denki to mute himself? Or GS, may I request that you mute Denki? There seem to be a problem with this person. If possible, remove him. Sorry, Ngakamba, can you continue, please? Ngakamba? I think it's gone. Govan?
Yes, sir. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Govan Whittles. I'm from ENCA. I have a few questions for clarity and then taking it further. Just for the record, which schools has SADTU identified as hotspot areas, or which areas have SADTU identified where the majority of hotspot schools are? And then if you have a date for the meeting of the minister, sorry, I may have missed that. And then this one, you're saying that you would have called for the writing off of the school year, but other learners are continuing. I would just like to see what SADTU believes should happen to the learners next year. Are you proposing that everyone repeats the grade because of the time lost? And then how would that impact on the new grade 1s and grade 8s coming into the system? And then finally, in the absence of the minister agreeing to SADTU's call for the suspension of all the classes, are you advising your members to continue going to school while you set up that meeting? Do you have any protection you can offer them? That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Yoliswa?
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify the thing about the lives that have been lost in Western Cape and Eastern Cape. Is it the teachers also included the learners, or is it just the teachers? And also, how many teachers across the country have lost their lives as a result of this virus?
Thank you, Yoliswa. Are you done?
Yes, thank you, I am.
Thank you, Yoliswa. Yes, I think those are the two last hands, and I think that is our last round of questions. If you can just respond to those two questions, then I think we'll be done with our media briefing. Yes.
DGS, are you able to respond quickly? I want to attend to something quickly. If he's ready, I can do that. Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah, DGS.
Okay, no, thanks, President. Thank you, General Secretary. The first question was around the question of hotspots. So we are of the view that schools are part of our communities. So when we identify communities, certain areas as being hotspots, epicenters in our country, if you talk about KZN being an epicenter, if you talk about the Western Cape being an epicenter, if you talk about Gauteng being an epicenter, if you say Mangaung is an epicenter, it then follows that all schools in those areas will then be in hotspots. They will be part of the epicenter. So we can't delink our schools from our communities. Therefore, we treat them as such. And our intervention then should be based on that information, that where we would have identified provinces and areas as being epicenters, everybody, every school, any entity in that area will then be seen and regarded as a hotspot and as part of the epicenter. That's the first one. The second one was around the question of a date for a meeting with the minister. We have not yet secured an exact date and time as to when we are going to meet the minister, but we are urging, we're saying this is urgent. I mean, we are approaching the peak now. So we are calling on the minister to really respond quickly to our request for a meeting, such that we are able to resolve this issue as a matter of urgency. On the question of us proposing whether there should be consideration of what will happen to learners, are we saying that all learners must repeat their grades in 2021? That's not what we are saying. We are saying that already there was learning, there was teaching that took place from the beginning of the year. So our learners were part of some learning from January, February, and March. And during that time, our learners were subjected to one way or the other. Some form of assessment took place between January and March. There was school-based assessment almost on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, up to some form of examination in some schools written in March. So we do have a base. We are not working from a zero base. So we're saying we can use that base, and when we do come back, maybe later during the year, continue with teaching, continue with assessment, continue preparing our learners up to November, December this year, and then subject them to another form of assessment, either it be in November and December. That will then assist us to make some determination on whether the learners can progress and or should not progress. But like I'm saying, it will not be a question of one, pass all. There is already work that the learners would have done. Like I'm saying, the additional work that we'll be doing when we come back should be able to assist us to direct our learners to the next grade in 2021. Our serious concern is always about grade 12, because we think that grade 12 at some stage will have to exit the system such that we make way for the grade 1s to come into the system. That's why we are saying that we'll have to prioritize grade 12, emphasize whatever work we can do around the grade 12s. When we talk about online learning, when we talk about availing data, when we talk about extending lessons to radios and so on and so forth, in the main, we are focusing on grade 12. All support, all our eyes should be, all our minds, among the focus should be around grade 12, because we want to deal with a practical situation that we might face in 2021 if we don't have that cohort exiting the education system and then making way for the lower of grade 1 to come into the system. So all other grades will be able to move. Like I'm saying, they will be progressed based on what they would have done. It won't just be a question of formality of them going to the next grade. Around how many teachers and learners would have passed away, we might not have the exact numbers about how many teachers would have passed away. We might not have the exact numbers of how many learners would have passed. I mean, the last time we got was 7 learners in the whole country would have passed away, but we can always provide you with more information if we can get the exact numbers about the learners. But we are concerned, it's not about numbers for us. It's about any life, even one life is a life too many. We don't want to lose any teacher. We don't want to lose any learner. That's why we don't want to entertain this debate of statistics, of reducing our lives, to reduce deaths into just a number. We know of our colleagues who passed away. We know the trauma that it causes when one of our colleagues leaves the system. That's why we would not want to reduce it to a number issue. But we are saying that any life is important and it should be regarded. And if it's possible, we should try our best to try to save whatever life that we are able to save as a country. Thanks, President.
Thank you, DGS. Members of the NEC, do we have anyone who wants to speak? You can just indicate by shouting.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. The question on what are you advising your members in the absence of that meeting with the minister not having taken place yet? What's your advice to your members?
Okay, that's fine. DGS, you are noting that. I was checking if there are any members of the NEC who will want to say something. I believe that we are all comfortable and enveloped by the Secretariat. DGS, if you can just respond to that last question so that we can close.
Yes, President, we are saying that we would want this meeting as a matter of urgency. We are calling on the minister just after this press briefing. The General Secretary will have to follow up with the office of the minister to make sure that we get this meeting as quickly as possible. And for now, we are saying to our members, they will have to be going back to school. We will advise them. I mean, it should not be beyond this week. We are advising our members to stay at schools. By late this week, we should be able to advise them on the next course of action. We are concerned about their condition, of course. We are concerned about their fears. We are concerned about the anxiety, the trauma that they are subjected to on a daily basis. But we call on them to bear with us, just allow us to engage the minister, put this proposal of the National Executive Committee to the minister, and then we'll advise them just after that meeting with the minister as to what is the next course of action, President.
Thank you very much, DGS. I believe we have come to the end of our press briefing. I just want to extend our gratitude and thank everybody who have participated in this briefing, as well as your contribution, the questions that were raised, thank the Secretariat for leading us in terms of presenting our statement and also responding to questions. Indeed, this is an experience for all of us. The pandemic is a new thing for all of us. Hence, we are calling upon everybody, members of the society, community, everybody to join us and be part of this call, because the principle should be to ensure that we save lives and also we ease the strain in our hospitals, given the fact that schools have got more numbers. The number of teachers are more than 450,000 in the country, learners are millions. So to try and minimize the movement up until the peak is over, that will assist in also easing the strain in our own health system as well. With those few words, we want to thank everybody who have participated and say thank you very much to all of you. Siyabonga.
President.
Yes.
Yeah, the media people then, Nomusa will then be giving them a revised a statement that will be ready, and then they will coordinate with Nomusa around those particular copies that will be sent.
Thank you. I thought you wanted to announce where lunch is served. Yes, but it's fine.
Okay, lunch is served virtually.
Thank you. The meeting is closed. Yes, Yabule.
Of course. Siyabonga.
Mandla.